Hi guys, this is Brian M and welcome to yet another exciting episode of the House Plan Podcast. Today, let's continue with our topic of a house not being an asset but rather a liability. So let's define the terms. In its simplest form, a liability is something that takes money away from you, whilst an asset is something that brings money to you. So in this case, your house is a liability because you spend money for it to be livable. You are spending money on rents, you are spending money on mortgages, you're spending money on the gardener. You're pretty much spending a lot of money each and every month for the house to be livable. But the big question is, so how then do you turn your house from a liability into an asset? This brings in this interesting concept of densifying or of house clusters. So it's a concept whereby you've got a big piece of land, you densify it by putting multiple residences in there. It can be townhouses, it can be apartments, but you're saying instead of it being a single user residence, you put a number of units in there. So that guarantees that your house becomes an asset, because from the look of things, it now starts to generate income through rentals or through sales. But there are some downsides to that whole concept. For example, when you densify, then you've got limited privacy. But then if the architecture is good, you might not even feel it. And also looking at the end goal, you'd rather have an asset than a liability. Because if you look into the market, you will realize that the cost of one townhouse in a complex is worth its value equals to the old house that's there plus the property. So it becomes a worthy investment and you get to get the most out of your property. So you're probably wondering, how then do you enter into a market like that, seeing that it's very capital intensive? So there are two ways to do it, if not three. The first way that you can do it is to partner with someone who has got the money. These are called JVs. So you get into a partnership, someone has got the money and you have got the land. When you come together, you build or you develop townhouses on your property. That also ensures that you've got a better return on investment, right? But the dynamics are like this. Your property or your land with the old house is probably 20% of the whole capital needed to develop a cluster setup. You are coming into a partnership, you bring in your 20%, which is your property, and then they bring in 80%, which is the money that is needed to build units there. And depending with how many clusters you are able to fit in there, you then share again the outcome at that rate, that is 2018. Is it fair? Yes, it is fair. It is a win-win situation actually to both parties, because it's very expensive to build. So if you really liquidate whatever you've got, that is converting the property into monetary terms, you will still realize that it is 20% of the whole capital or of the whole lot that is required to develop a cluster setup. The second way of doing it is for you to become the main developer. So how it works is you come up with your concept of what you need to do, you have got your land, and then you fund the whole process yourself. So this is probably the best way of doing it, because you then get to have the most out of your property. But it is the most difficult because no one is helping you with cash. You have to self-finance the whole project, right? It's either you have the money or you then start selling off plan. So whichever route you take, if you develop it yourself, then it's more profitable. The third way of doing it is to approach financial institutions or bankers so that they give you the money that you need. You develop your project and then in due time you have to pay back the money. So there are these three ways of doing it. Now that we've discussed a bit about the funding and how to develop it, but you can't develop it without following the necessary procedures. So the first thing that you probably need to do is to hire an architect or a building designer so that they bring the vision to life. That is, they plan the whole project, how many units, what type of units you'd want to put on there. And then after the architect is done, you have to of course engage a QS who will quantify as to how much it would cost you. And then after that is done, you have to apply for permits from the relevant authorities. And in this case, you have to approach a city council, submit your plan or your drawings, and then they will have to give you a permission to develop the project. And then once that is done, then you are all set, you are good to go. So why then does these kinds of developments seem to be more profitable in a way? In a modern way of living, people are more interested in a cluster setup because it enhances a good community, and also there are shared amenities like your security, gardening, and general cleanliness of the place. So you realize that those facilities are shared. If you are in a development which has got like 10 townhouses, let's say, you realize that the security is distributed equally among the people. So it doesn't become a hefty amount which is difficult for one person to bear. And also it applies with gardening, it applies with a whole lot of other things. In some cases, people share internet as well. So that makes them very, very attractive to the prospective buyers or the people who want to live in them. Another very, very attractive feature that house clusters or townhouses have is that it creates this lock up and go system. For example, if you are someone who travels a lot, you don't have to worry about security too much. It's a simple lock up and you go, because there are people always in that community. So security becomes somewhat more efficient. As long as you lock up your property, there's always a 24-hour security. You are more comfortable wherever you are, that no one is going to come and break into your house. Someone once asked me this question: with all this that's happening in our neighborhood, you've got clusters springing up in most places, and it seems like something that is trending. So the question that people always ask is, will that bubble ever burst in the near future? So my answer to that is, I don't see the bubble bursting anytime soon, because if you take, for example, the concept of urbanization, it is a global issue, it is a global crisis that authorities and architects and planners are cracking their head to solve. You've got more and more people living in urban areas as opposed to people living in rural areas. And what that does is it puts a strain, it puts pressure on housing. So housing will still remain a commodity that is sought after by a lot of people due to urbanization. And besides, the population is ever increasing, and thereby there is always a need for good accommodation. So will the bubble ever burst? Well, I doubt it. I don't think it will happen in the near future. So in conclusion, changing your house from a single user residence into a multiple user residence makes more sense economically, because you would have successfully turned your liability into an asset. And if you keep on doing that, and if you would follow that advice, then you are soon on your way to financial freedom. So this is it, guys, from me and the rest of the team. I'll catch you on the next one.